Chapter 1. The auction. Husethi rain had turned the cobblestones black by the time Ilara arrived at the merchant's hall, her thin cloak doing nothing against the cold that seeped into her bones. She kept her eyes down, watching her worn boots navigate the slick streets. Because looking up meant seeing the faces of people who had once called her friend, once invited her to their tables, once promised her a future that now lay shattered like glass beneath her feet. Her family had sold her, not in those words, of course. Her father had used softer language when he'd taken her aside 3 nights ago, his hands trembling, his eyes unable to meet hers. An arrangement, he'd called it, a necessary sacrifice. The harvest had failed for the 3rd year running, and the moneylenders were circling like carrion birds. Her 2 younger sisters needed dowries. Her brother needed an apprenticeship that cost more than their farm would earn in a decade, and Ilara was 26, unmarried. And according to the physician her father had paid to examine her barren, infertile. The word had followed her through the village like a curse after her broken engagement 2 years prior. Thomas had wanted sons to inherit his father's mill. When none came after their year of courtship, when the midwife had clucked her tongue and declared, Ilara's womb cold, he'd cast her aside for a merchant's daughter with wider hips and a proven bloodline. Now her father had found a different use for her. The hall loomed before her, its Gothic arches disappearing into the mist. Lamplight flickered behind tall, narrow windows, casting long shadows across the entrance, where 2 guards stood like sentinels. They wore black uniforms. She didn't recognize not the king's colors, not the merchant guilds, something older, something that made the hair on the back of her neck rise. Name, one of them said, his voice flat. Ilara Thorne. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. My father, we know. The guard's eyes were strange, too pale, reflecting the lamplight like an animal's. 3rd door on the left. Wait with the others. The words sent ice through her veins. She wasn't the only one then. Inside, the hall was warmer, but no less oppressive. The ceilings soared overhead, supported by columns carved with figures she couldn't quite make out in the dim light, writhing bodies, mouths open in ecstasy or agony. Candles burned in iron sconces, their flames to steady, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The 3rd door opened into a smaller chamber, where 7 other women waited. Some sat on the benches lining the walls, hands folded in their laps. Others paced, their faces pale and drawn. All of them were young. All of them wore the same expression Ilara had seen in her mirror that morning, resignation edged with terror. First time? The woman who spoke was perhaps 30. Her dark hair pinned back severely, a fading bruise on her cheekbone. She sat in the corner, back straight, as if she were attending a church service rather than whatever hell this was. Ilara nodded, not trusting her voice. They'll explain the terms shortly. The woman's accent marked her as nobility or former nobility. You're here because someone paid your family's debts in exchange for your service. Service to whom? Before the woman could answer, the door opened again. A man entered, tall, thin, dressed in black velvet that whispered as he moved. His face was ageless, neither young nor old, and his eyes were the color of dried blood. Ladies, his voice carried easily through the room without rising above a murmur. Thank you for your patience. I am Silas, and I represent the 7 houses of the Night Court. You have been selected as potential blood servants for our noble families. The room tilted. Ilara gripped the edge of the bench, her knuckles white. Blood servants. Vampires. The stories were old, relegated to children's tales and drunk men's boasts. Creatures of the night who fed on human blood, who lived forever in the shadows, who made pacts with desperate mortals and demanded terrible prices. Most people dismissed them as myth. The church declared them heresy. But in the villages, in the places where the old ways still lingered, people hung garlic and wolfsbane over their doors and made signs against evil when the moon was dark. You will each be presented to a member of one of the houses, Silas continued, as if he were discussing a business transaction. If chosen, you will enter into a contract, your blood freely given, in exchange for your family's financial security and your own protection. The term is 7 years. You will live in your patron's household, attend them as required, and maintain absolute discretion about the existence and nature of the Night Court. And if we refuse? Someone whispered. Silas smiled, showing teeth too white to sharp. Then your family's debts remain. The moneylenders will come at dawn. I believe several of you have younger siblings. His gaze swept the room. The workhouses are always accepting children. Alara's stomach twisted. Her sisters were 14 and 12, sweet, bright girls, who deserved better than the mines or the factories. The selection will begin shortly, Silas said. I suggest you compose yourselves. First impressions matter greatly to the noble blood. He left as silently as he'd entered, and the room erupted into frantic whispers. Alara sat frozen, her mind racing. 7 years of serving a vampire. 7 years of offering her throat to a creature that should not exist. 7 years of the door opened again, this time. The whispers died completely. The man who entered was not like Silas. He moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, and the candlelight seemed to bend away from him, leaving him haloed in shadow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a coat of midnight blue that made his pale skin luminous. His hair was black, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from marble, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. But it was his eyes that held Alara captive, silver, like moonlight on water, like winter frost. And when they swept across the room and landed on her, she felt the impact like a physical touch. He stopped. His head tilted slightly, almost imperceptibly. Then he spoke, his voice low and carrying the weight of centuries. Silas appeared at his elbow, startled. My lord Seelan, perhaps you would like to her, Seelan repeated. And this time it was not a request. He was looking at Alara, only at Alara, and as he began to walk toward her, the other women shrinking back as if he were fire, and they were made of paper. Alara realized with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. Chapter 2. The mark of House Nightborn. Alara's breath caught in her throat as Seelan stopped before her, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of his chest, no rise and fall, no breath, nothing that marked him as living. The other women had scattered to the edges of the room like frightened birds, but she found she couldn't move, couldn't look away from those silver eyes that studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Your name, not a question. A command, soft as velvet, hard as steel. Alara Thorn, my lord. Her voice wavered only slightly. Small mercies. Look at me, Alara Thorn. I am looking at you. His lips curved barely. No, you're looking at what you think I am. Look at me. She didn't understand, but she tried, forced herself to see past the supernatural stillness, the predatory grace, the silver eyes that held centuries she couldn't fathom. And they're just there, in the slight tension at the corners of his mouth, the way his hands remained carefully at his sides. She saw control, rigid, absolute control, as if he were holding himself back from something better. He murmured. Then louder, Silas, bring the contract. My lord, there are others I have chosen. Seelan's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Bring the contract. House Nightborn claims this one. Silas bowed stiffly and retreated. The moment he was gone, Seelan's attention returned to Alara with laser focus. You're afraid? Yes. No point in lying. She could feel her pulse hammering in her throat, and something told her he could hear it. Good. Fear will keep you alive. He circled her slowly, studying her the way one might study a painting or a puzzle. Your father sold you because you're barren. That's what the physician told him. Humiliation burned through her fear. Yes, physicians are often wrong. He completed his circle, standing before her again. Especially about matters they don't understand. Tell me, Alara Thorn, why did you come here tonight? I had no choice. There's always a choice. You could have run, thrown yourself in the river, stolen a horse and fled to the next kingdom. His head tilted. But you didn't. Why? Because her sisters needed her. Because her family, for all their weakness and desperation, would suffer if she ran. Because she was so damn tired of being discarded and dismissed. And at least here, at least tonight, someone had chosen her. She couldn't say any of that. Instead, she lifted her chin. Because 7 years of service is better than a lifetime of knowing I condemned my family to ruin. Something flickered in his expression, approval, perhaps, or recognition. 7 years, he repeated softly. And if I told you it might be longer? Her heart stuttered. The contract is negotiable. He took a step closer. She could smell him now, not cologne or sweat, but something older, like parchment and winter air and the peculiar metallic tang of old blood. I am Seelan Nightborn, head of the oldest house in the Night Court. My bloodline predates your nation by 1,000 years. I have had blood servants before, Alara Thorn. Most lasted their 7 years, and left wealthier and none the worse for wear. Most? His smile was sharp. Some chose to stay longer. Some chose to become what I am. And some, he paused, some I failed to protect. The honesty shocked her. She'd expected lies, manipulation, the casual cruelty of the powerful. Not this quiet admission of past failures. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. There are 7 other women here. Some are prettier, younger. I don't need pretty. His voice cut through her self-deprecation like a blade. I need intelligent, resilient, someone who understands survival. His eyes held hers. You've already survived being broken and discarded once. That kind of strength doesn't come from an easy life, Silas returned, carrying a leather portfolio. He extracted a parchment covered in elaborate script and handed it to Celine, who barely glanced at it before offering it to Alara. Read it, he said, carefully. I'll answer any questions you have. She took the contract with trembling fingers. The language was formal, archaic in places, but clear enough. 7 years of service to House Nightborn. Blood to be given no more than thrice weekly, never more than 1 pint at a time. She would live in Celine's household, attend him as required, maintain discretion about the night court's existence. In exchange, her family's debts would be paid in full, and she would receive a stipend of 50 gold crowns per month, more money than her father made in a year. There were other clauses. Protections, she realized. She could not be harmed by other members of the court. She could not be forced to perform any service beyond blood giving without her explicit consent. She had the right to refuse him if she was ill or injured. The right to end the contract early if he violated its terms. It was far more generous than she'd expected, which made her suspicious. What's the catch? She asked. Celine's expression didn't change. The catch is that I am at war. The words hung in the air like a blade. Behind her, she heard one of the other women gasp. War? Alara's voice was steady, but her hands had gone cold. House Corvin has been challenging House Nightborn's territory for 3 years. The conflict has been escalating. He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. 2 months ago, they killed my last blood servant, tore her apart and left her on my doorstep as a message. Alara's stomach lurched. And you want to replace her? I need to replace her. His silver eyes were unreadable. A vampire without a willing blood source is a danger to everyone around him. We become desperate, reckless. We lose control. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. I am the only thing standing between House Corvin and the human settlements in the Eastern Territories. If I fall, or if I lose myself to bloodlust, thousands of mortals will die. So, yes, Alara Thorne, I am asking you to walk into a war. But I'm also promising you that I will defend you with everything I am. She should refuse. Any sane person would refuse. But she thought of her sisters, of the workhouses, of Thomas's casual dismissal and her father's trembling hands. She thought of the physician who'd declared her barren without even examining her properly, and the village women who whispered about cold wombs as if she were somehow defective. She thought about the fact that Celine Nightborn, ancient and powerful and terrifying, had looked at her and seen strength. If I do this, she said slowly, I want something added to the contract. Silas made a choking sound. Celine's eyebrows rose fractionally. Oh, if House Corvin comes for me, I want the right to defend myself. I want access to weapons, training if necessary. She met his gaze. I won't be bait. I won't be a victim. If I'm walking into your war, I'm walking in as a participant. For a long moment, Celine studied her. Then slowly, deliberately, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his severe features into something almost warm. Done, he said, and held out his hand. Alara took it. His skin was cool, smooth as marble, and the moment their palms touched, she felt something shift, a pull, a connection, like a hook catching beneath her ribs. Welcome to House Nightborn, Celine said softly. Try not to die. Chapter 3. Nightborn manor. The carriage that carried them through the midnight streets was like nothing Alara had ever seen. Black lacquered wood inlaid with silver filigree, curtains of heavy velvet that blocked out the world beyond. She sat across from Celine, acutely aware of the silence between them, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestone. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the merchant's hall, the signed contract tucked into his coat pocket. He simply watched her with those unnerving silver eyes, still as a statue, while she tried not to fidget under his scrutiny. You may ask, he said finally, his voice cutting through the quiet. Ask what? Whatever questions are crowding that active mind of yours. I can practically hear you thinking. Alara hesitated, then decided honesty had served her well so far. Do you sleep in a coffin? His laugh surprised her, low and genuine, warming something in his expression that had seemed carved from ice. No, I sleep in a bed like any civilized creature. Though I do require complete darkness and absolute silence during the day hours. He tilted his head. I also don't turn into a bat. I cast no reflection, because mirrors were once backed with silver, which burns us, and garlic is merely unpleasant, not lethal. Silver burns you? Most pure metals do, to varying degrees. Silver is the worst. He pulled back his coat sleeve, revealing a thin white scar across his wrist. This was from a silver dagger, 300 years ago. It never fully healed. 300 years. The number made her dizzy. How old are you? 1,247 years old this winter solstice. He said it the way someone might mention their height. I was born in the year 778, turned at 29, and have been 29 ever since. She tried to imagine its centuries of existence. Watching empires rise and fall, everyone you'd ever known crumbling to dust while you remained unchanged. It seemed less like immortality and more like an endless haunting. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Becoming what you are. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the marble facade. Every day, he said, and the raw honesty of it stole her breath. And not at all. Both things can be true. The carriage began to slow. Through a gap in the curtains, Alara glimpsed iron gates opening onto a long drive lined with ancient oaks. Then the manor itself came into view, and she forgot to breathe. It rose from the landscape like something from a fever dream, all Gothic spires and arched windows, built from dark stone that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Towers spiraled toward the sky at odd angles, and gargoyles perched on the corners, their stone faces twisted in expressions somewhere between ecstasy and agony. Home, Seelan said. Though his tone suggested the word meant something complicated, the carriage stopped before the main entrance, where a woman waited. She was perhaps 50, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in a black gown that marked her as upper household staff. But her eyes, dark, sharp, missing nothing, held the same ancient quality as Seelan's. My lord, she said as Seelan descended, then turned her gaze to Alara. So, you actually found one, Alara Thorne. This is Moira. She manages the household and has been with House Nightborn for. He glanced at Moira, 234 years. My lord. Alara's legs felt unsteady as she stepped down from the carriage. You're vampire, yes. Turned by Lord Seelan's great-grandfather. Moira's assessment was thorough and unsettling. You're not what I expected. Few people are what you expect, Moira, Seelan said mildly. Show Miss Thorne to the East Wing. She'll need suitable clothing, a tour of the grounds, and the household protocols. I trust you'll handle it with your usual efficiency. Of course, my lord. Moira's expression softened fractionally. Will you be feeding tonight? The question hung in the air. Seelan's gaze slid to Alara, assessing. No, let her settle first. Tomorrow evening will be soon enough. Relief and something stranger, disappointment, flickered through Alara. She crushed both feelings down as Moira gestured toward the entrance. Come along then. The East Wing is this way. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of corridors and staircases that seemed to shift and multiply. The walls were lined with portraits of pale, beautiful people whose eyes followed their progress. Candles burned in sconces that must have numbered in the hundreds, casting dancing shadows across. Tapestries depicting scenes that were alternately magnificent and disturbing, battles and coronations and feastware. The wine ran suspiciously red. The Lord's chambers are in the North Tower, Moira explained as they walked. The West Wing houses the other household staff, all human, all sworn to discretion. The South Wing is forbidden. The dungeons beneath us are older than the manor itself and run for miles. Don't go wandering. What's in the South Wing? Moira's expression went carefully blank. History, pain, things best left undisturbed. She stopped before a carved wooden door. This will be your suite. Lord Seelan chose it himself. It has the best morning light for when you wake. The rooms beyond were stunning. A sitting area with velvet furniture positioned before a massive fireplace. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in emerald silk. An adjoining bathing room with a copper tub large enough to swim in. Wardrobes already filled with gowns and rich fabrics, all in deep colors: burgundy, forest green, midnight blue. He keeps clothing for blood servants? Alara asked, running her fingers over a velvet sleeve. He keeps clothing for guests, Moira corrected. You're not a servant, Miss Thorne. You're a ward under his protection. There's a difference. She moved to the windows, pulling back heavy curtains to reveal a view of sprawling gardens disappearing into darkness. You'll take meals in the dining hall, unless the Lord requests your presence. You're free to explore the manor and grounds, except for the south wing. A maid will attend you each morning. I don't need a maid. Moira's lips twitched. The Lord said you'd say that. Nevertheless, Clara will be assigned to you. She's human, pleasant, and knows how to keep her mouth shut. You'll also begin weapons training with Marcus, our master at arms, starting tomorrow at noon. Alara blinked. He actually meant it? About training me? Lord Seelan always means what he says. Moira's expression grew serious. Which brings me to the most important rule of this house, Miss Thorne. The Lord is not human, no matter how human he may seem. He has appetites and abilities you cannot fully comprehend. He can move faster than your eye can follow, hear your heartbeat from 3 rooms away, and kill with his bare hands before you'd have time to scream. Fear coiled in Alara's stomach. Are you trying to frighten me? I'm trying to keep you alive. Moira stepped closer, her voice dropping. But here's the other truth. Lord Seelan is the most honorable creature I've known in 2 centuries of existence. He will defend you with everything he has. He will honor every word of your contract. And if you show him loyalty, he will move heaven and earth to protect you. She paused. The last blood servant Isabel, she was my friend. House Corvin took her because she wandered beyond the wards alone, thought herself invincible because she bore the Lord's mark. Don't make her mistake. What mark? In answer, Moira pulled down the collar of her gown, revealing 2 pale scars on her neck, barely visible. When he feeds from you tomorrow, you'll bear the same. It marks you as House Nightborn. It warns other vampires that harming you means war. Her eyes were hard. It also makes you a target. Alara sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. I signed up for a war I don't understand, in a world that shouldn't exist, to serve a vampire who's been alive since before my country was born. Yes, Moira's voice gentled slightly. But you also just secured your family's future, gained the protection of the most powerful house in the Night Court, and earned the Lord's respect, which is rarer than you know. She moved toward the door. Get some rest, Miss Thorne. Tomorrow your real education begins. After she left, Alara sat in the silence of her new rooms, watching the firelight dance across unfamiliar walls. Through the window, she could see a single tower rising above the rest, a light burning in its highest window, Seelan's tower. Seelan's light. She touched her throat, where tomorrow his mark would rest, and wondered what she'd truly agreed to. Chapter 4. First, Blutalar woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to curtain, her body disoriented by the unfamiliar softness of the bed, the silence of the manor. For a moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all. The auction, the vampire, the contract signed in ink that had shimmered silver in the candlelight. Then she saw the gowns hanging in the wardrobe, and reality settled over her like a weight. Clara arrived with breakfast, a girl perhaps 18, with kind eyes and careful hands, who set a tray of fresh bread, honey, and tea on the table without comment. She helped Alara dress in a gown of deep plum wool, far finer than anything she'd owned before, and braided her hair with practiced efficiency. Lord Seelan asked that you meet him in the library at sunset, Clara said, as she worked. Moira will fetch you when it's time. Does he always sleep through the day? Always, miss. Vampires can't tolerate sunlight, it burns them to ash within minutes. Claire's voice was matter of fact, as if she were discussing the weather. The whole manor goes quiet during day hours. Those of us who are human handle the daytime tasks, and the vampires emerge after dark. How many vampires live here? Just Lord Seelan and Moira now. There used to be more, before the war with House Corvin started. Clara's hands stilled briefly. The others fell in battle, or were sent to guard the eastern territories, before Alara could ask more. Marcus arrived for her weapons training, a grizzled man with silver-shot hair and scars crisscrossing his forearms. He led her to an inner courtyard, where the walls were high enough to block prying eyes, and spent 2 hours teaching her the basics of knife work. You're small, he said bluntly, which means you'll never overpower an attacker through strength alone. But small means fast, and fast means you can strike before they expect it. He pressed a thin blade into her palm. Silver-plated. Keep it on you always. If a vampire grabs you, go for the throat or the heart. It won't kill them, but it'll hurt enough to make them let go. Her hands were blistered by the time Moira appeared in the courtyard entrance, her expression unreadable. "It's time," she said simply. Alara followed her through corridors that seemed different in the fading light, shadows lengthening and deepening, until the manor felt alive, watchful. They climbed a spiral staircase that wound up and up, until Moira stopped before a heavy oak door. "Remember what I told you," Moira said. "He won't hurt you, but feeding creates intimacy. Don't be alarmed by what you feel." Then she was gone, and Alara was alone before the door. She knocked, her heart a drum against her ribs. "Come in, Alara." His voice carried through the wood, and she pushed the door open. The library was magnificent, 2 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with books in a dozen languages, their spines worn and treasured. A fire crackled in a stone hearth large enough to stand in. Tall windows looked out over the darkening gardens. And in the center of the room, surrounded by stacks of books and papers, sat Seelan. He'd changed since last night, now dressed in simple black, his hair loose around his shoulders. He looked younger somehow, less severe, though his eyes still held those impossible centuries. "You came," he said, rising. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might have reconsidered in the daylight, packed your things and fled." He moved toward her with that preternatural grace. "I wouldn't have blamed you. The contract, I wouldn't have held you to it. Not if you'd truly wanted to leave." He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "I don't feed from the unwilling, Alara, ever. So before we proceed, I need to know, is this truly your choice?" She thought of her sisters, safe because of her sacrifice. She thought of the silver blade Marcus had given her, the respect in Moira's eyes, the fact that for the first time in 2 years, someone saw her as strong rather than broken. "Yes," she said. "It's my choice." Something in his expression softened. "It will hurt at first. The venom in our bite, it takes a moment to work, to turn pain into something else. I'll be as gentle as I can." "What does it feel like after the venom works?" His gaze held hers. "You'll have to tell me. It's different for everyone." He gestured to a chair near the fire, and she sat, her pulse thundering. Seelan knelt beside her, a vampire lord, ancient and powerful, kneeling and took her hand in both of his. "Look at me," he said softly. "Not at what I'm about to do. At me." She met his eyes, silver in the firelight, and saw something unexpected there. Hunger, yes, but also concern, carefulness. The same rigid control she'd noticed in the merchant's hall. "I've got you," he murmured, and bent his head to her wrist. The first pierce of fangs was sharp, bright pain that made her gasp. But then warmth. It spread from the bite like honey through water, turning the pain into something strange and dizzying. Her vision went soft at the edges. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, feel the pull as he drank. And beneath it all, something else, a connection. A golden thread that seemed to tie her pulse to his stillness, her warmth to his cold. She could feel his hunger, ancient and vast, and the iron will that held it in check. Could feel his relief as her blood filled him, easing some desperate edge she hadn't realized he carried. She could feel his loneliness. The revelation struck her like lightning. This creature who'd lived 1,000 years, who commanded a house and held territories, who was feared and respected, he was so utterly, profoundly alone. Seelan pulled back, his eyes wide, silver bleeding to black at the edges. "You," he released her wrist, stumbling backward. "How did you?" "I felt you," she whispered, her voice strange in her own ears. "Your loneliness. I felt it." He stood abruptly, turning away from her. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "That's not possible. The bond doesn't work that way. Not from a single feeding. Not unless." He stopped, cutting himself off. "Unless what?" Alara rose on unsteady legs. The room tilted slightly, but the dizziness was fading, replaced by a strange clarity. The bite on her wrist had already stopped bleeding, 2 small punctures that would scar pale and permanent, unless there's a resonance, Seelan said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "When vampire and human blood are compatible in a way that transcends simple sustenance. It's rare. I've lived over a millennium and only heard of it a handful of times." "What does it mean?" He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his expression made her chest tight. "It means the bond between us will be stronger than typical servant and master. It means you'll be able to sense my emotions, and yours, not thoughts, but feelings. It means," he paused, "it means you're tied to me now in a way that can't easily be undone." Fear should have been her first response. Instead, what she felt was curiosity, and something warmer, more dangerous. You felt my loneliness, Seelan continued, his voice rough. What else did you feel? She thought about lying, but the connection hummed between them still, that golden thread she could almost see in her mind's eye. Your control. How hard you work to hold yourself back. She stepped closer. Your fear that you'll fail. That you'll lose yourself to the bloodlust and become something monstrous. His jaw clenched. I've killed before, Alara, centuries ago, when I was young and careless. I have been the monster, but you're not anymore. She didn't know where the certainty came from, but it rang through her like a bell. You've spent centuries learning control, becoming something better. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it. No one has ever seen me that clearly before. The vulnerability in his voice made her brave. Then they weren't looking properly. Something shifted in the air between them, charged and dangerous. Seelan closed his eyes, breathing slowly, though he didn't need breath. When he opened them again, the silver had returned, the control locked back into place. You should rest, he said, his voice once more carefully neutral. The first feeding always leaves humans weak. Clara will bring you dinner in your rooms. It was a dismissal, gentle but absolute. Alara wanted to argue, to push, to explore this strange new connection. But exhaustion was creeping through her limbs, and Seelan's expression had shuttered, closed. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Alara. She turned. Thank you. The words were simple, but weighted with something that might have been relief or gratitude or the beginning of trust. For your blood, for your honesty, for seeing. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled into the darkening corridor. Behind her, in the library, Seelan stood alone by the fire and pressed his fingers to his temples, feeling the echo of her heartbeat in his veins, the warmth of her blood spreading through his cold body, and for the first time in 300 years, he felt afraid. Chapter 5. The South Wing. 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt both strange and oddly natural. Alara woke with the sun, trained with Marcus until her muscles screamed, explored the manor's endless corridors during the quiet day hours when the vampires slept. At sunset, Seelan would summon her sometimes to the library, once to his study, once to the gardens, where night-blooming flowers filled the air with their heady perfume, and he would feed, each time. The connection grew stronger. She learned things about him she had no right to know. The way guilt sat heavy in his chest when he thought of the vampires he'd lost to House Corvin. The fierce protectiveness he felt toward the human settlements under his protection, though he tried to pretend it was merely strategic necessity. The bone-deep weariness that came from centuries of conflict, of always being the one who had to be strong, controlled, unbreakable, and he, she realized with growing unease, could feel her in return. On the fourth morning, Alara woke from a nightmare. Thomas's face, her father's trembling hands, the physician's cold pronouncement of her barrenness, to find a note slipped under her door in elegant script. You are not broken. Whatever they told you, whatever they made you believe, it was a lie born of their ignorance. Sleep well. Shay pressed the note to her chest and tried not to think about how dangerous it was, letting him see inside her like this. That afternoon, restless and unable to settle, she found herself wandering the manor's western corridors. She'd explored most of the house by now: the kitchens where human staff prepared meals, the armory where Marcus kept his weapons, the portrait gallery where centuries of Nightborn ancestors stared down with their silver eyes. But she hadn't been to the South Wing. The forbidden South Wing. She told herself she wasn't going there. She was just walking, following the pull of curiosity through corridors that grew progressively darker, older. The walls here were bare stone, the air colder. No portraits, no tapestries, no signs of life, just a single door at the end of a long hallway, iron-banded and ancient. Alara's hand was on the handle before she'd consciously decided to try it. It shouldn't open. Moira had said the South Wing was forbidden, and surely Seelan would have locked it. But the handle turned smoothly, and the door swung inward on silent hinges. The room beyond stole her breath. It was a bedchamber, frozen in time. A 4-poster bed with rotting silk curtains, a vanity covered in dust, its mirror cracked down the center, and everywhere, covering every surface, pinned to the walls. Scattered across the floor were drawings, hundreds of them, thousands, all of the same woman. She was beautiful in the sketches: dark hair, laughing eyes, a smile that seemed to light the page. Some drawings showed her reading, others dancing, others simply existing in quiet moments that spoke of deep intimacy. The artist had captured her with obsessive detail, as if trying to memorize every curve of her face, every expression. The vanity, beneath the cracked mirror, lay a withered bouquet and a note in faded ink. My beloved Isolde, forgive me. I was not strong enough. I let them take you. I let you burn. Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. The handwriting was Seelan's. I told you the south wing was forbidden. Alara spun. Seelan stood in the doorway, but this was not the controlled, careful vampire she'd come to know. His eyes were black, his face a mask of barely contained fury. The air around him seemed to vibrate with suppressed violence. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. The door was open. Get out. His voice was inhuman, resonating with power that made her bones ache. She ran, through corridors that blurred with her tears, up staircases that seemed to multiply, until she burst into her rooms and slammed the door behind her, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. She could still feel him through the bond, rage and grief and shame so overwhelming she thought she might drown in it. She'd trespassed on sacred ground, violated the one boundary he'd set. Hours passed. The sun set beyond her windows, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber. Clara came with dinner, her eyes worried, but Alara couldn't eat. She simply sat by the fire, waiting for Seelan to terminate her contract, to send her away. She deserved it. When the knock finally came, it was gentle, almost hesitant. Alara. His voice was raw. May I come in? She opened the door. Seelan stood in the hallway, and he looked diminished somehow. The fury had burned out, leaving only exhaustion. His eyes were silver again, but haunted. I'm sorry, they said simultaneously. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I shouldn't have shouted. You didn't know. You told me not to go there. I went anyway. She stepped back, letting him enter. Who was she? Isolde? For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the darkening gardens. My wife. 500 years ago. His voice was carefully controlled, but she could feel the grief beneath it through the bond. We met when I was still young, for a vampire only 3 centuries old. She was human, brilliant, fearless. She understood what I was and loved me anyway. What happened? House Corvin happened. His hands clenched on the windowsill. Back then, vampires taking human wives was controversial. Many saw it as weakness, fraternizing too closely with cattle. Lord Corvin, the great-grandfather of the current lord, saw an opportunity to humble House Nightborn. He petitioned the Night Court to nullify our marriage. When I refused, Seelan's voice broke. He claimed Isolde had violated the ancient laws by bearing knowledge of our kind without being marked. He demanded trial by sunlight. Horror crawled up Alara's spine. No, I fought. I called in every favor, challenged every law, threatened war. But the court sided with Corvin. They said she'd corrupted me, made me soft, made me more human than vampire. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. They burned her at dawn in the court's plaza, made me watch as the sun rose, and she screamed my name until the end. Alara crossed the room and took his hand, this ancient creature's hand, and felt it trembling. That's why you hate House Corvin. That's why this war will never end. Not until one of our houses is ash. He turned to face her, and the raw pain in his expression made her chest ache. I locked that room after she died. I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't destroy it either. It's been 500 years, and I still. He stopped, unable to finish. Still love her, Alara said softly. Still fail her. His voice was barely a whisper. Every day, I fail her. Because I'm still here, and she's not. Because I couldn't save her. Because I wasn't strong enough to stand against the court. Through the bond, Alara felt the weight of his guilt, 5 centuries of it, pressing down like a physical thing. And beneath it, the fear that he would fail again, that history would repeat itself, that everyone he tried to protect would burn. Is that why you're so controlled? She asked. Why you hold yourself back so carefully? After Isolde died, I lost myself for a while. Decades of bloodlust and violence. I killed anyone who reminded me of the court of Corvin, of my failure. He met her eyes. I became the monster they'd always said I was. It took a century to claw my way back to something resembling sanity, to rebuild control. I swore I would never lose myself like that again, but you're afraid you will. I'm afraid that caring makes me weak, that if I allow myself to feel too much, to connect too deeply, I'll lose control when it matters most. His silver eyes held hers. And now I have you, with this impossible bond, and I can feel your emotions like they're my own. And I'm terrified. Of what? That House Corvin will take you like they took Isolde. His voice broke. That I'll fail you the way I failed her. That I'll have to watch you die. Because I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, fast enough. And this time, the bond means I'll feel every moment of your fear, your pain, your stop. Alara stepped closer, close enough to feel the supernatural cold that radiated from him. You're not the same vampire you were 500 years ago. You've spent centuries learning control, building alliances, protecting people. You're not weak, Seelan. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You barely know me. I know you through the bond. I feel what you feel. She touched his chest, where a human heart would beat. And I feel your strength, your honor, your desperate need to protect everyone, even at the cost of your own happiness. His hand came up to cover hers, cool and steady. You should be afraid of me, afraid of what I might become. I'm not afraid of you. And saying it, she realized it was true. I'm afraid for you. Because you carry so much, and you won't let anyone help you bear it. For a long moment, they stood like that vampire and human, ancient and young, tied together by blood and something deeper. Then Seelan raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her scarred wrist, where his mark rested. Thank you, he murmured, for seeing me. Even the broken parts I try to hide, were both broken, Alara said. Maybe that's why the bond works. His smile was sad and beautiful. Perhaps, outside in the darkness beyond the manor walls, something howled a sound that was not quite wolf, not quite human. Seelan's head snapped up, his entire body going rigid. They're here, he whispered. House Corvin, they've found us. Chapter 6. The siege begins. The manor erupted into controlled chaos. Moira appeared at the door within seconds, her face grim. How many? At least a dozen. Seelan was already moving, pulling Alara toward the corridor. Maybe more. They're testing the wards on the eastern perimeter. The wards will hold, Moira said, falling into step beside them. But not indefinitely. If they brought a blood mage, they brought one. I can smell the death magic from here. Seelan's grip on Alara's hand was iron. Get everyone to the central hall. Lock it down. If they breach the outer defenses, we fall back to the inner sanctum. They descended the main staircase at a run. Below, the manor's human staff were already gathering. Clara, Marcus, a dozen others Alara had seen but barely spoken to. They moved with practiced efficiency, no panic. As if they'd drilled for this moment. They probably had. Marcus tossed Seelan a sword that gleamed silver in the candlelight, then handed Alara the blade he'd been training her with. Stay close to his lordship, he said grimly. If they get past him, go for the heart or throat. Don't hesitate. Another howl split the night, closer now. The windows rattled in their frames. What are those things? Alara's fingers tightened on the knife hilt. Bloodhounds. Seelan's voice was flat, deadly. Humans twisted by vampire venom, then starved until they're nothing but hunger and rage. House Corvin uses them as shock troops, expendable, vicious, and nearly impossible to reason with. You mean they were people once? Yes, and Corvin will answer for every soul he's destroyed. Seelan positioned himself at the main doors, Moira at his side. Alara, get behind. The doors exploded inward. 3 creatures lunged through the shattered wood, human shaped but wrong. Their bodies elongated and twisted, their mouths too wide and filled with needle teeth. They moved with inhuman speed, and the stench that rolled off them was death and rot and ancient hunger. Seelan met the first one mid-leap, his sword a silver blur. The bloodhound's head separated from its body before it hit the ground. Moira took the second, her movements centuries practiced, efficient and brutal. The third came straight for Alara. Training took over. She dropped low, as Marcus had taught her, letting the creature's momentum carry it past her, and drove her blade up into its exposed throat. Silver burned through corrupted flesh. The bloodhound shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and collapsed. Alara stood frozen, staring at the dissolving corpse, her blade dripping black ichor. Good, Seelan said, suddenly beside her. His eyes scanned her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, I killed it. You defended yourself. There's a difference. He turned back to the shattered entrance, where more shapes were gathering in the darkness beyond. But there will be more. Many more. As if summoned by his words, a voice drifted from the night, cultured, amused, dripping with malice. Lord Nightborn, how delightful to find you home. A figure stepped through the ruined doorway. He was tall, pale, beautiful in the way all vampires were beautiful, but where Seelan's features held strength and control, this vampire's face was all sharp angles and cruel amusement. His eyes were the color of arterial blood, and when he smiled, his fangs gleamed like daggers. Lord Corvin, Seelan's voice could have frozen fire. You violate the Treaty of Night by attacking another lord's stronghold. Treaty? Corvin laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You dare speak to me of treaties? Your very existence violates the natural order, Nightborn. A vampire who coddles humans, who protects them, who takes them to wife. His gaze slid to Alara, and she felt it like a physical touch, invasive and wrong. Oh, how delicious. You've taken another pet. Tell me, does this one know how the last one ended? Does she know about Isolde? Screaming as the sun Seelan moved, one moment he was beside Alara, the next he had Corvin by the throat, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack stone. Her name, he snarled, his voice inhuman, does not belong in your mouth. Corvin's smile never wavered, despite the hand crushing his windpipe. Still so emotional, still so weak, he gestured lazily, and the bloodhounds poured through the entrance like a wave of nightmares. Chaos erupted. Seelan released Corvin to meet the flood of twisted creatures, his sword, singing. Moira fought at his back, and Marcus rallied the human guards into a defensive line. But there were too many bloodhounds, and more kept coming. An endless tide of corrupted flesh and hunger. Alara found herself pressed into the defensive circle, fighting alongside Clara, who wielded a silver-tipped spear with surprising competence. A bloodhound lunged at them. Alara's blade found its eye socket. Another came from the side. Clara's spear took it through the chest, through the bond. Alara felt Seelan's fury, cold and controlled and absolutely lethal. He was magnificent and terrible, moving through the bloodhounds like death incarnate. But she could feel the calculation beneath his rage-counting enemies. Assessing wounds, planning 3 moves ahead. Then she felt something else. A spike of alarm. She turned just as Corvin appeared beside her, moving too fast for human eyes to follow. His hand closed on her arm, and pain exploded through her. His touch burned like acid, like ice, like nothing she'd ever felt. Let's see how much control he has, Corvin whispered. When I take what's his. He yanked her toward the shattered entrance. Alara screamed, driving her blade into his arm, but he barely flinched. Through the bond, she felt Seelan's terror spike, then a shadow fell between them, Marcus. The old warrior moved with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a human, positioning himself in Corvin's path. My lord gave me one order above all others, he said calmly, raising his sword. Protect the lady, even if it costs me everything. How noble. Corvin's free hand lashed out, casual as swatting a fly. Marcus's head snapped back. His sword clattered to the floor. He crumpled, blood pooling beneath him, his eyes already glazing. No. Alara's scream tore from her throat, and through the bond, she felt Seelan break. The temperature plummeted. Every candle in the hall gutted out simultaneously, plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness, something ancient and terrible stirred, the thing Seelan had spent centuries holding back. The monster he'd sworn never to become again. When his voice came, it resonated with power that made the stones themselves tremble. You killed my man. In my home. In front of my blood-bonded. Each word was a promise of violence. I'm going to show you why House Nightborn has stood for 10,000 years, Corvin. I'm going to show you what I become when you take what's mine. The darkness moved. Alara couldn't see what happened next. Could only hear Corvin's confident laughter cutting off into a scream. The wet sounds of tearing flesh, the crash of bodies against stone. The bloodhounds scattered, their simple minds recognizing a greater predator. When the candles reignited seconds later, Seelan stood over Corvin's broken body. The rival lord's arm was torn off, black blood pooling beneath him. Seelan's eyes were completely black, no silver remaining, and when he spoke, his voice was barely human. Get out of my territory. Tell your house that the treaty is void. Tell them that if they come for what is mine again, I will burn their stronghold to the ground and scatter their ashes across the wastelands. He leaned down, speaking directly into Corvin's ear. And tell them that Lord Nightborn no longer pretends to be civilized. Corvin's remaining bloodhounds dragged their master into the night, leaving a trail of black blood. The other creatures fled after them, melting into the darkness. Silence fell over the ruined hall. Alara's legs gave out. She collapsed beside Marcus's body, her hands shaking as she reached for him. No, no, no Marcus, but his eyes were empty, his chest still. He'd died protecting her, this man she'd barely known. Because his lord had ordered it, she felt Seelan approach. Felt the wrongness rolling off him in waves, the monster still too close to the surface, the control hanging by a thread. When she looked up, his black eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, barely controlled. He's dead. Marcus is dead because of me. He's dead because of Corvin. Seelan's hands clenched, and she saw blood, not his own, dripping from his fingers. Because I wasn't fast enough. Because I'm never, he stopped, turning away sharply. Moira, see to the wounded. Get someone to prepare Marcus for the funeral rites. I need, he stumbled toward the stairs, and through the bond. Elara felt him fragmenting, the monster and the man warring inside him. The control he'd spent centuries building, cracking under the weight of fury and grief and 500 years of failure. Seelan, she started after him. Don't, the word was anguished. Don't follow me, Elara. Not right now. I can't if you come near me right now. I might, he fled up the stairs, moving with inhuman speed. And she felt through the bond the moment he locked himself in his chambers, felt his rage, his grief, his absolute terror at what he'd almost become. Moira touched her shoulder gently. Let him be, child. He needs time to master himself again. What you saw tonight, that was the vampire he used to be, before he learned control. Before Isolde, the monster that took him decades to cage. Her voice was sad. Marcus knew the risks. We all do. But his death will haunt the Lord for years. Elara looked down at Marcus's body, at the peaceful expression on his weathered face, and felt something harden inside her. She was tired of people dying to protect her. Tired of being helpless while those who cared for her paid the price. If she was bound to Seelan, tied to him by blood and fate, then she would learn to fight at his side, not as something to be protected, but as a true partner. Starting now. Thank for watching. The second part coming next day.